You clicked on this video because you're a nurse who is considering going to medical school, but of course you're wondering if you can work while you're in medical school. I get this question all of the time. I get flooded with direct messages on Instagram about nurses who want to know if they can pick up PRN shifts while they're in medical school. I'm gonna go through all of what you can expect when you go through medical school from your first year through your fourth year, and when the best times would be for you to pick up PRN shifts. The short answer is yes, you can work while you're in medical school, but it makes all of the difference when you are at these shifts. I'll give you a couple of anecdotes. One of my best friends, she was an ICU nurse. She's one of the nurses that actually inspired me to go and apply to medical school when I was a newbie nursing student. She's an incredibly hardworking human being. And actually, when she was doing her post-bac program, which for her was over the course of 1 year, she was working every Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 12-hour shifts, and she would do her post-bac program from Monday through Thursday full time. So she was able to do all of her pre-med prerequisites in the course of a year while also being able to pay for all of it out of pocket since she was working during this entire year. I think because she was able to do that successfully, she continued to work while she was in medical school. Now, she only continued to work for about 7 or 8 months, but as a registered nurse who is picking up PRN shifts, that can add significantly to helping reduce your loan burden as well as paying bills and covering rent. Another good friend of mine during medical school was a scribe for a vascular surgery office. He did this as a pre-med and continued to do it as a medical student. This scribe position was very flexible, so he was able to pick up shifts when he had free time. This ended up not only supplementing his income during his time as a medical student, but it also gave him a strong networking community with vascular surgeons. He ended up applying to vascular surgery, which, if you don't know, is one of the most competitive subspecialties in surgery. His program, and actually most programs, only typically offer 1 to 2 spots for their entire residency for vascular surgery. So he was able to use his job as a way to network and create these really good connections with vascular surgeons who not only vouched for him, but wrote him letters of recommendation. He ended up matching in the same city that he did his scribe job in. Working during medical school will not only supplement your income, but also give you an opportunity to network, which you know that's something that I always harp on. It's one of those mistakes that people make early on. They don't create enough connections with people to make sure that they're able to match in the residency that they envision for themselves. The last example I'll give you is the other day I was eating out at a restaurant, and the person who was serving me was actually a third-year medical student at the local university here. I asked her what clinical rotation she was on because third year was one of the hardest years for me. It was the most time intensive, and I couldn't imagine trying to work during that time, but she was on an outpatient rotation, so she had evenings and weekends off to be able to pick up waitressing shifts so that she can supplement her income. She honestly looked super unbothered and not stressed out at all, which was amazing. I really admire people like that who really try to do what it takes to make things work for them. Obviously, I've given you a couple of examples now that it is possible to work during medical school. People do it, but I want to go over specifically when the best timing would be, because there's actually very key times during your 4 years that you have more free time to be able to pick up PRN shifts. There are definitely better times than others to work. That was a bit of a long intro, but I want to introduce myself to anyone who is new here. My name is Lily Nguyen. I am a current first-year resident. I matched into diagnostic radiology, which I will start in July. I worked as a nurse for 5 years prior to starting medical school, and I created this channel to encourage and empower other RNs to pursue this route as well. I also think that a lot of the information that I share here is very relevant to non-traditional students as well with strong clinical backgrounds. Let's start talking about the best times to pick up PRN shifts during medical school. Medical school typically starts in the summer. So for me, it started in July. I think that summer prior to starting in July is a great time to start loading up on shifts and saving a bunch of money before you start med school. Having that financial cushion is super helpful, and I definitely use my registered nursing salary savings to help me get through kind of like that first 6 months of medical school. Let's start with the first 2 years of medical school. These are your didactic years, your study heavy years. The first year of medical school is very heavy in basic sciences. You remember this from studying for the MCAT. You'll learn a ton of basic sciences, anatomy, physiology, biochemistry, pharmacology, and pathology. The content of first year also includes a lot of introduction to history and physicals. During the course of my education, I learned how to do history and physicals with a cohort of medical students. It was called my societies group. It consisted of 6 medical students, and we are super close. I actually just went to a recent wedding of one of them, and we continue to learn in group settings together throughout all 4 years of medical school. During that time, you're developing relationships with your other medical students, as well as your skills in history and physicals. This is also the time where you're introduced to the gross anatomy lab. At our school, we were paired with our societies group, and we would spend our entire first year of medical school dissecting a full body. So each week we would have a different section of the body to dissect, and then we would have anatomy practicals where we would go into the anatomy lab and actually have to write out the name of certain body parts that were flagged. And that was some of my favorite testing times. I honestly loved anatomy, which is part of the reason why I'm going into diagnostic radiology. That was going over what first year of medical school consists of. What it feels like is honestly a fire hydrant of information. You're constantly studying and trying to keep up with all of the coursework that's being given to you. It's really hard for me to compare medical school and nursing school because both felt difficult and challenging to me. The main difference is that medical school is like 10 times the information all at once. So it's challenging in another way because of just how much you have to engulf. During my first year of medical school, which was in 2020. I did most of my didactics online because it was during the height of the COVID pandemic and we were isolated and locked down at home. Some of the lectures are required that you are there synchronously, while others are asynchronous and pre-recorded. So I watched most of those at 2 times speed, which gave me a lot of free time to either do more studying or exercise, see my friends. I could have picked up PRN shifts during that time. Now that we are in the post-COVID era, I do still think that it's possible to pick up PRN shifts during the first year of medical school just because of how predictable the schedule is. Once you finish the first year of medical school, you go into your first summer of medical school. And I always suggest that people do a paid summer research program during their first medical school summer. You can go ahead and work full-time as a registered nurse, but I think that doesn't actually help build you into a fully well-rounded medical student, especially if you don't have a strong research background. This is your chance to develop that and add it to your residency CV. Of course, you can also do your paid research summer program in conjunction with picking up registered nursing shifts on the weekends. Let's talk about what year 2 of medical school consists of. This is going to be a deeper dive of clinical medicine. Now you're going to be able to study more of the organ systems. This is when we start learning about the specialties like cardiology, pulmonology, the renal system, neurology, etc. You'll learn a lot more pathology and pharmacology as well and be able to connect diseases with pathology and how to treat them. In the second year, the clinical relevance of the information that you're learning becomes more easy to comprehend and things just make more sense during your second year. I will say it's very stressful because you're coming closer now to your first board exam, the Step 1 exam. Fortunately, the Step 1 exam is now pass-fail, and a majority of medical students pass this exam on their first try. I think Step 1 anxiety can be pretty intense. Honestly, with Step 1 being now pass-fail, you might find yourself having a little more free time to be able to pick up PRN shifts maybe during your Step 1 prep. I'm such a horrible test taker that I needed all of my dedicated time to be fully focused. So there was no way I was going to be able to pick up any work during this time. I think especially if you front load a lot of your Step 1 studying in your second year of med school, by the time you get to your dedicated period meaning your school often will give you a certain amount of weeks to only study for Step 1. You will not have any didactics or clinical responsibilities. All you're responsible for is studying for your Step 1. Say you put in a good amount of studying and you feel like you can pick up shifts on the weekends, go for it. But if you're someone like me who has a lot of test anxiety and issues with standardized testing, then focus just on passing your exam. In general, in your first and second year of med school, I would suggest not picking up any extra shifts or working the week of a big high stakes exam. Often these exams are going to make or break your grade for that clinical month rotation. Now, once you take your exam, often the week after is called like a dead week or a chill week. I often didn't even study during those weeks just to help myself reset. You can possibly use that time to pick up some PRN shifts. Just be wary of burnout because there's so much buildup coming up to a big exam. You're doing so much studying that you take the exam and you're super exhausted. And even though the following week kind of frees you up from studying and possibly picking up PRN shifts, would you rather be picking up a PRN shift or kind of helping yourself restore and recover. I've always chosen to just kind of help myself reset. Before I go on to your third year of medical school and what to expect, I do want to just mention that sometimes you have holidays and weekends off. First year of medical school, often you will have holidays and weekends off. Those are great times to pick up PRN shifts. Not only that, because you'll get the holiday incentive, you'll get the weekend incentives. Once you enter your third year of medical school, it is not for sure that you will have holidays and weekends off, especially if you're on tough rotations like general surgery. Now, once you get into third year of medical school, this is an awesome time. Now you enter the wards. Rotations can be super tough, but honestly, it was some of the most rewarding time during medical school because finally I can take everything that I've learned and apply it to patient care and actually start working with patients again. This is the time where you transition from your clinical learning and didactics to the hospital. You'll have core rotations in specialties like internal medicine, family medicine, psychiatry, emergency medicine, general surgery. You'll also have opportunities to take electives. This is when you start having and experiencing all the long hours that residents work. The schedule is often unpredictable. I often wouldn't even know my rotation schedule until like 1 or 2 weeks prior to the rotation starting. And the learning curve is super steep because for a lot of people, it's now applying everything that you've learned in the books into actual clinical medicine and practice. At the end of every month rotation, you have something called a shelf exam. That is what assesses your knowledge of that actual specialty. So say you do a 4-week rotation in neurology, you're now going to have a shelf exam in neurology. Your score on these shelf exams are often compared on a curve to all the other medical students in the nation. And at my school, we were graded pass-fail. Thank goodness. Once you start third year of medical school, you are often feeling pretty useless, but then towards the end, things just start to make sense and you feel somewhat competent by the end of the year. This is when you learn how to write physician notes, present patients, go over differential diagnoses, and think like a doctor. The most challenging thing about third year is balancing all of these clinical work hours that you're doing with preparing for the shelf. I often will be on the wards and like during my general surgery month, I would be on my phone studying for my shelf exams in between patient cases just to make sure I can get it in because I honestly didn't have any time outside of rotating on these clinical wards to actually do any shelf studying. I can't imagine trying to pick up PRN shifts during these really, really tough months. Just know though that when you're rotating through outpatient clinical rotation, you're going to have kind of their schedule. So if their schedule is only Monday through Thursday or Monday through Friday, you'll have the weekend off and you'll have evenings free. Of course, you should be studying for your shelf during those times, but if you feel like you're able to pick up PRN shifts, this might be an okay time to do it. After your third year of medical school, once you've finished all of your shelf exams, you're going to take another board exam. This is the step 2. Step 2 feels a lot more fulfilling and rewarding to take just because it's not based on so much of the basic sciences and now more based on clinical medicine. This is not a pass-fail exam, it's a 3-digit score. Often it is now what is used to rank your stats during residency interviews. I would say it's definitely the more important of the two to make sure that you get a great score on, especially if you are applying a competitive specialty. I do feel like if you're working in your third year of medical school, it's basically working part-time on top of a full-time job. Again, please be wary about burnout. Now, once you get to 4th year of medical school, this is kind of the amazing prime time where you're able to do rotations in the specialty that you chose and also start preparing for residency applications. This might actually be the time where working PRN might be your best choice. You have a lot more time to do electives, but you do have to be wary about all the time that's dedicated to interviews. Luckily, since the post-COVID era, most residency interviews are now on Zoom, so you don't have to spend on travel costs. I think it also depends on your medical specialty because things like neurosurgery will likely require you to travel to those specific institutions to do your interviews. The 4th year of medical school consists of something called sub-Is or sub-internships. This is when you do a full month rotation on your chosen specialty and you're acting like an intern, almost practicing on how to be a resident. You work normal resident hours. Sometimes as a med student, residents actually dismiss med students a little early so they can go home and study. If you're on your sub-I, this is unlikely to happen. Because they want you to be prepared for internship, your hours are often mimicking an intern. When I did my sub-Is in 4th year med school, all of it was front-loaded, so I did all of it in the first kind of summer that I started 4th year med school. Once I completed my sub-I, I was able to then pick up elective rotations. Elective rotations are often a lot more chill. The hours are not like wards where you're working 6 days a week, 12-hour shifts. It's often going to be a lot more chill where you are working maybe 3 to 4 hours a day without any exams at the end of the month. You do have to remember that during this time, you have to be preparing for your residency applications. This means, yes, again, you'll have to write your personal statements. You'll do a residency activities list just like you did for medical school, and then you start applying to specific residencies. And when you do that, you have to do a lot of research on which programs might align with your values that are in your geographical area. Then you submit your residency applications and you start getting interview invites to do residency interviews. And this can be scheduled between October and I think my last one was February. Anytime during that time, you can be getting an invitation where you have to schedule as soon as possible because people pick up the dates very quickly and then you might end up not getting an interview date that you didn't want. But like I said earlier, I do think that the Zoom interview format has made this process a lot less stressful. During your 4th year, you're a lot more comfortable and confident in the hospital setting. You will have the added stress of applying to residencies, doing interviews, and then the upcoming match in March. By January of your 4th year of medical school, hopefully you're done with all your interviews, your board exams are behind you, and you're just now anticipating the match in March. I do believe from January to the time that you graduate medical school will be a great time for you to work, even full-time if you wanted to. Just make sure that you're done with all of your medical school credits. Sometimes they allow you to take online courses to fulfill the rest of your medical school credits. So just make sure you inquire with your institution. When it came down to it, I did not choose to work during medical school. I honestly was ready to put my nursing career behind me and move on and fully embrace becoming a doctor. I absolutely value my free time, and I did not want to spend my free time working in the hospital. I do understand, though, that people want to make an additional income to help lower their loan burden while in medical school, and that's absolutely reasonable. But if you're going to ask me if I would recommend it, I would say no. One, because I do think that medical school really requires a lot of focus, and it's important to keep your head on right. I think it can really bog you down, and if you're trying to handle all the stress of medical school education on top of working as a nurse, which is not a stress-free job. You're working with patients all the time and it could just weigh on you. Just know that working PRN is possible, but balance is everything. I think if you're not careful, you can end up super exhausted, burnt out, and jaded about medicine even before you graduate medical school. So my advice is really to prioritize school and your education and be really strategic in picking up PRN shifts if you really need the income. I hope you found this video helpful. If you have any questions, please leave a comment. As always, it would mean a lot to me if you like and subscribe. I always forget to do this, but please check out my RNtoMD ebook. It answers all of your questions. I've had thousands of questions over the last several years. I put it all in my ebook guide. I think it's a great resource if you don't know where to start. And if you have any more questions, let me know. Honestly, I wish I had this guide when I was a nurse trying to navigate the pre-med path, which is why I created one to help you. Thank you for watching.